episode of Mystery Unsolved. I am, of course, your host, Justin Bienvenu, and tonight I have a very interesting topic and discussion for tonight. So, before I get into it, just take a look at the new look. So, tonight on Mystery Unsolved, I am going to be discussing the infamous, notorious Lizzie Borden. Now, if there's another case, you've heard me in the past say there are cases that I've done that have been beaten to death, and this is no exception. So, in fact, this is probably top five. This is probably one of the top five most beaten to death cases in the history of our world. So, for those who do know about it, maybe I'll enlighten you and share some new details you didn't know. For those who have never heard of Lizzie Borden, where have you been? And glad I can educate you. So without further ado, well, before I get started, obviously this is going to be the same format that I usually did in the beginning videos. I am going to, of course, read a little bit of the history on Lizzie Borden, what, of course, she is known for, and then we will get into theories as to what happened, because we all seem to think we know what happened, but is that truly what happened? Without further ado, Mystery Unsolved, Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Borden was born on July 19th, 1860. She died on June 1st, 1927. So my camera's my camera's a bit wonky. She was an American woman tried and acquitted of the August 4th, 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts. Now, I actually live fairly close to Fall River, but oddly enough, I've never been to the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. Probably something I should look into doing. So one thing I apparently cannot do, I'm going to play a little rogue here. Excuse me. Okay, there we go. All right. I want to. My camera's a bit weird tonight. I don't know why. So yeah, you can see me. There we go. All right, let's do this. I apologize. No one's watching anyway, Jonathan. Just keep going. No one else was charged in the murders, and despite ostracism from other residents, Borden spent the remainder of her life in Fall River. And I also believe in that very house. So there's that. She died of pneumonia at age 66, just days before the death of her sister Emma. Interesting. I did not know that. The murders and trial received widespread publicity throughout the United States, and along with Borden herself, they remain a topic in American popular culture to this present day. As I said, they have been depicted in numerous films, theatrical productions, literary works, and folk rhymes, and are still very well known in the Fall River area. That's because there's a Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, which is the very house that she supposedly murdered her parents. Got to leave it to us Americans to not only glorify someone being murdered, but turn it into a bed and breakfast. That's the most American thing to do, right? Crazy. All right, so we're going to skip her early life because I'm not a forensic guy. I'm not a FBI guy, so we're just going to skip that. And also, I'm going to turn the sound off on this so you don't hear my phone go off a half a dozen times like I usually do. Trying to get this as good as I can. All right. John Morse arrived in the evening. Okay, who's John Morse here? Is that the... Oh, it would be good to know who the parents are here. Lizzie Borden was born to Sarah Anthony Borden and Andrew Jackson Borden. Her father's name was Andrew Jackson Borden. I did not know that either. So I believe they were somewhat in the considered aristocrat society, like they were rich. I don't know how rich Fall River was back in the day, but rich enough that you can call them rich. Okay. again, it gets into the whole, yeah, some of the history might be worth noting, but let's see here. Yeah, so they were rich, basically. Borden and her older sister Emma, Lenora Borden, had a relatively religious upbringing and attended Central Congregational Church. So they were a religious family too. That's probably important. So it's probably good that I read the early life of one Lizzie Borden. So let's see. Doo, doo, doo. Okay, so they're very up. Their upbringing is very aristocratical, I suppose, if that's even a word. They go to church. They also attend things around town, so they're also very much a part of the community. So again, interesting to know. 3 years after the death of Lizzie Borden's mother, Sarah, Andrew married Abby Durfee Gray. Lizzie stated that she called her stepmother Mrs. Borden and demurred on whether they had a cordial relationship. She believed that Abby had married her father for his wealth. Ah, so there's also a maid named Bridget Sullivan, the Borden's 25-year-old live-in maid who had immigrated to the U.S. from Ireland. Okay. Basically, there's a whole bunch. The night before the murders, Benis, Beniscombe Morse, John Morse, the brother of Lizzie and Emma's deceased mother, so that's their uncle. I don't know why they just didn't say that was their uncle. Visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with Andrew. Some writers have speculated that their conversation, particularly about property transfer, may have aggravated an already tense situation. For several days before the murders, the entire household had been violently ill. A family friend later speculated that mutton left on the stove to use in meals over the several days was the cause, but Abby had feared poisoning, as Andrew had not been a popular man. Huh. You learn something new every day. I've never heard that before. So that's very interesting. And again, I'm going to push this back because it's just driving me crazy. All right. There we go. John Morse arrived in the evening on August 3rd and slept in the guest room that night. After breakfast the next morning, at which Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, Morse, and the Borden's maid, Bridget, were present, Andrew and Morse went to the sitting room, where they chatted for nearly an hour. Morse left around 8:48 a.m. to buy a pair of oxen. Oh, that's, oh okay. Hey, I gotta go. I gotta buy a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River, planning to return to the Borden house for lunch at noon. Andrew left for his morning walk sometime after 9 a.m. Although the cleaning of the guest room was none of Lizzie or Emma's regular chores, Abby went up sometime between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed. According to the forensic investigator, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. She was the first struck on the side of the head with a hatchet, which cut her just above the ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor, creating contusions on her nose and forehead. So Abby, if you remember, this is the stepmother. This is Lizzie's stepmother. Her killer then struck her multiple times, delivering 17 more direct hits to the back of the head, killing her. So it's 17 strikes. I'm not going to do the old folk rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. But clearly, it wasn't 40. That was highly exaggerated. When Andrew returned around 10:30 a.m., his key failed to open the door, so he knocked for attention. Sullivan went to unlock the door, finding it jammed. She uttered an expletive. I like how they know that the door was jammed and that the maid swore. How is that known? How is that possibly known? She would later tell, oh, because she was alive. Oh, okay. She would later testify that she heard Lizzie laughing immediately after this. She did not see Lizzie, but stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. Ah, the plot thickens. This was considered significant as Abby was already dead by this time, and her body would have been visible to anyone on the home's second floor. Lizzie later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked her where Abby was, and she had replied that a messenger had delivered Abby a summons to visit a sick friend. I'm going to read that again just because I feel like this is significant. Lizzie later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked her where Abby was, and she had replied that a messenger had delivered Abby a summons to visit a sick friend. So Lizzie was upstairs, but when her father asks her, she wasn't upstairs, and her stepmother, who was clearly upstairs in her own bedroom where she was killed, Lizzie had said that she went out. So either this is misinformation or Lizzie's covering up the fact that she killed her stepmother. Lizzie stated that she had then removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay down on the sofa for a nap. That is normally contradicted by the crime scene photos, which show Andrew wearing boots. Okay, so as we will get into, the father took a nap, lay down on the couch. This couch is infamous because it's, I believe it's a red couch. And the crazy part is that couch, to this day, is still in that house. And yeah. She then informed Sullivan of a department store sale and permitted her to go, but Sullivan felt unwell and went to take a nap in her bedroom instead. So for some strange reason, everyone's feeling ill, so perhaps it was the bad mutton. But also, maybe that's why they decided to take a nap when the day hasn't really even begun. Because look, Sullivan testified she was in her third floor room, resting from cleaning windows, when just before 11:10 a.m., she heard Lizzie call from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick, father's dead. Someone came in and killed him." So, first of all, these people must be like, are they night owls? Do they stay up all night and they wake up early? Because the father took a nap, the maid took a nap, and then she's up at 11 a.m. So, like, how long of naps are they taking here? How is this significant? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out why it is that they're taking naps before noontime when most people are pretty much waking up at like, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, and they're like, oh, I'm going to take a nap. I don't understand this. Andrew was slumped on a couch in the downstairs room, the red chair that still to this day is in the house. You can actually sit on the very couch that Andrew Borden was killed on. I'm not kidding. I'm fairly certain of that. I am fairly certain of that. Struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon, the same that was used to kill his wife, Abby, upstairs. One of his eyeballs had been split cleanly in two, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked. Well, obviously, because he was taking a nap, unless he somehow just kind of sort of looked up and saw the hatchet, but just before he died. His still bleeding wound suggested a very recent attack. Dr. Bowen, the family's physician, arrived from his home across the street to determine that both victims had died. Detectives estimated his death had occurred at approximately 11 a.m. Okay, let's go back. Sullivan testified she was in a third-floor room, resting from cleaning windows, when just before 11:10 a.m., she heard Lizzie say, "Maggie, come quick, father's dead. Someone came in and killed him." And the detectives estimated that the death had occurred at approximately 11 a.m. So, if it wasn't Lizzie, that means that within 10 minutes, Somebody came in and hacked up and killed Andrew Borden, and then 5 minutes after that, or maybe a minute or two afterwards, Lizzie comes down the stairs, comes into the next room, from the next room, sees her father, and says to the maid that her father's dead. Or she did it herself, which of course we assume is what happened. Ooh, excuse me. Lizzie Borden's initial answers to the police officer's questions. I apologize, I got something in my throat apparently. Lizzie Borden's initial answers to the police officer's questions were at times strange and contradictory. Initially, she reported hearing a groan or a scraping noise or a distress call before entering the house. So apparently she wasn't in the house? I'm confused. 2 hours later, she told police she had heard nothing and entered the house not realizing that anything was wrong. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. Okay, so that apparently does line up. So apparently, if Abby Borden was in the house, the stepmother, Lizzie didn't know. She just assumed that she got a note from a friend, or maybe she just made that story up. So that's actually not entirely believable. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if someone could go upstairs and look for her. Sullivan and a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, were halfway up the stairs, their eye levels with the floor, when they looked into the guest room and saw Abby laying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Borden reported that they disliked her attitude. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite her attitude and changing up alibis, nobody bothered to check her for bloodstains. Police did search her room, but it was a cursory inspection. At the trial, they admitted to not doing a proper search because Borden was not feeling well. They were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. Well, say so. Like, oh, I'm not feeling well. It's all right. We don't need to check your room. Like, there's two people alive in this home, and there's two people dead in this home. The maids, I don't know. In the basement, police found two hatchets, two axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. Okay. I know it's the 1800s, but I ask, who keeps two hatchets, two axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle in their home? Who needs that many hatchets and axes? Farmers? Blacksmiths? Sure, but it's still a little odd. You'd keep that stuff in a garage or a shed, somewhere outside, but to keep it down in a basement? I don't know. I don't know. That seems weird to me. It seems weird to me, and I don't like it. The hatchet head was suspected of being the murder weapon, as the break in the handle appeared fresh, and the ash and dust on the head, unlike that on the other bladed tools, appeared to have been deliberately applied to make it look as if it had been in the basement for some time. Again, how do you determine that? Like, however, none of these tools were removed from the house. So if something looks like a murder weapon, you should probably remove it from the house. Take it back to the station and have that shit analyzed. But no, we're just gonna keep it in the house, and we don't need to look at Lizzie Borden for bloodstains because she's not feeling well. It's fine. Apparently, detectives in the 1800s are as dense as people from the 40s. Because of the mysterious illness that had stricken the household before the murders, the family's milk and Andrew and Abby's stomachs, removed during autopsies performed in the Borden dining house, were tested for poison. None was found. Okay, so I'm going to read that without the parentheses of removing during the autopsy. Because of the mysterious illness that had stricken the household before the murder, the family's milk and Andrew and Abby's stomachs were tested for poison. None was found. Okay, so you can rule out salmonella or whatever the heck that you get from drinking bad milk. Residents suspected Lizzie for purchasing hydrocyanic acid in a diluted form from the local drugstore. I have so many questions to this sentence, it's not even funny. Residents suspected Lizzie of purchasing hydrocyanic acid in a diluted form from the local drugstore. Okay, first of all, how many people are we talking about? Residents. People talk. Fall River's small. I get it. But how many people are accusing her of this? How many people know enough to accuse her of this? Like, know her personally? And how many people even know what hydrocyanic acid is in a diluted form? Like, how do you even know that much? It's one thing to know what the acid is, but now you're saying, oh, it was in a diluted form. I think you used it. Okay, like, that seems like a bit of a stretch. She defended that she inquired about the acid so she could clean her furs. In parentheses, despite the local medical examiner's testimony that it did not have antiseptic properties. None of that made any sense to me. All right, we're 21 minutes in, and I am still not finished with this. So from here on in, we're dealing with a special edition, folks. Special edition. All right. Lizzie and Emma's friend Alice Russell decided to stay with them the night following the murders, while Morse spent the night in the attic guest room, contrary to later accounts that he slept in the murder site guest room. Police were stationed around the house. Borden entered the salon. Police stationed around the house on the night of August 4th, during which an officer said he had seen Borden enter the cellar with Russell, carrying a kerosene lamp and a slop pail. He stated he saw both women exit the cellar, after which Borden returned alone. Though he was unable to see what she was doing, he stated it appeared she was bent over the sink. All right. So basically, there's a lot of detail here. The evening a police officer and the mayor visited the Bordens, Lizzie was informed that she was a suspect in the murders. The next morning, Russell entered the kitchen to find Borden tearing up a dress. She explained that she was planning to put it on the fire because it was covered in paint. It was never determined whether it was the dress she had been wearing on the day of the murders. Like, common sense would tell you that it's probably important, if you're a detective, to keep an eye on what the person is wearing. Because that way, the next day, when you go over their house and you see them doing something shady, like ripping up a dress in the kitchen, you can say, hey, isn't that the dress? No, that's the dress you were wearing yesterday. That must mean, to just be, oh, I'm ripping up a dress in the kitchen because I got paint on it. When a day before, your parents were slaughtered in your own home. I don't know. The convenience of that is just sloppy detective work again. Unfreaking believable. Borden appeared at the inquest hearing. Her request to have her family attorney present was refused under a state statute, providing an inquest must be held in private. She had been prescribed regular doses of morphine to calm her nerves, and it is possible that her testimony was affected by this. Oh, of course, blame the old morphine. Her behavior was erratic, and she often refused to answer a question, even if the answer would be beneficial to her. She often contradicted herself and provided alternating accounts of the morning in question, such as saying she was in the kitchen reading a magazine when her father arrived home, then saying she was in the dining room doing some ironing, then saying she was coming down the stairs. She also said she removed her father's boots and put slippers on him, while the police photographs clearly showed him wearing his boots. Big old mess. The district attorney was aggressive and confrontational. On August 11th, Borden was served with a warrant of arrest and jailed. The inquest testimony, the basis of the modern debate regarding her guilt or innocence, was later ruled inadmissible at her trial in June 1893. Contemporary news, contemporary, yeah, contemporary newspapers articles noted that Borden possessed a stolid demeanor and bit her lips, flushed and bent toward Attorney Adams. It was also reported that the testimony provided in the inquest had caused a change of opinion among her friends, who have heretofore strongly maintained her innocence. The inquest received significant press attention nationwide, including an extensive three-page write-up in the Boston Globe. Yay. A grand jury began hearing evidence on November 7th, and Borden was indicted on December 2nd. Borden's trial took place in New Bedford starting on June 5th, 1893. This gives you the attorney's names. We don't need to know any of that. 5 days before the trial's commencement on June 1st, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. Oh, well, this just got interesting. This time the victim was Bertha Manchester, who was found hacked to death in her kitchen. The similarities between the Manchesters and Borden murders were striking and noted by jurors. However, Jose Correa de Mello, a Portuguese immigrant, was later convicted of Manchester's murder in 1894 and was determined not to have been in the vicinity of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. Well, that's just a ridiculous coincidence, isn't it? Okay. Prosecutors argued that the killer had removed the handle on the axe because it would have been covered in blood. One officer testified that a hatchet handle was found near the hatchet head, but another officer contradicted them. Oh my God. So the big problem here is that everybody but Lizzie Borden and the sister and the maid, if you take them out of it, pretty much every single person that's trying to defend her, well, actually, now who's contradicting? Lizzie's contradicting herself, and everybody that looks into the case is contradicting themselves. Though no bloody clothing was found at the scene, because it was ripped up the day before, the day after Lizzie was in the kit, yeah. Though no bloody clothing was found at the scene, Russell testified that on August 8, 1892, she had witnessed Borden burn a dress in the kitchen stove, saying it had been ruined when brushed against wet paint. Okay. Again, I said this earlier, but it just seems that's suspicious as hell. Like, during the course of the trial, defense never attempted to challenge this statement. Missed opportunity much? The fact that the defense never attempted to challenge the fact of the paint in the dress being ripped up would be the equivalent of OJ trying the glove on, and then the defense being like, well, that's nothing to look into. You know what? Never mind. You don't have to try. No, no. Kind of the same thing to me. All right, so we're now 30 plus minutes in here. I'm gonna wrap this puppy up. Both victims' heads have been removed during autopsy, and the skulls were admitted as evidence during the trial and presented on June 5th, 1893. Well, that's just the most morbid thing I've ever heard happen in a trial. Upon seeing them in the courtroom, Borden fainted. Evidence was excluded that Borden had sought to purchase prussic acid, hydrogen cyanide, purposely for cleaning a sealskin cloak from a local druggist on the day before the murder. The judge ruled that the incident was too remote in time to have any connection. Again, with this acid stuff, the trial has been compared to later trials of Bruno Hamprin, Bruno Hopman, Ethel and Julius Rossberg, and O.J. Simpson as the landmark in publicity and public interest in the history of American legal proceedings. I didn't even know that was going to be there, but it's definitely similar to O.J. in the sense of there's like obvious evidence that needs to be presented, and the defense or the defense is just like, we don't need to look into that. It's being given to you on a silver platter. It's right there. You could have it solved, but here we are years later talking about it. Although acquitted at trial, she got away with it. They said she didn't do it. Borden remains the prime suspect in her father and stepfather's murders. Writer Victoria Lincoln proposed that in 1967 that Borden may have committed the murders while in a fugue state. Another prominent suggestion was that she was physically and sexually abused by her father, which drove her to kill him. Okay, so basically, all right, that's all I'm going to read. I'm going to give you the theories. I will actually skim down just in case to see the. All right, what are the theories here? Let's get into that. Let's wrap this puppy up. This is a very long video. Basically, to this day, it is highly speculated that even though she was acquitted, that Lizzie Borden killed her father and stepfather. After reading that, I think it might be possible. I was always the believer that, because it's so up in the air, you just don't know. But after reading some of that, it's kind of like, well, kind of sounds like she did. But if she didn't kill her parents, who did? Does that sound familiar? That's right, that sounds like the O.J. Simpson trial. In other words, if O.J. Simpson didn't kill his wife, who did? Well, we're back on that. We're back on that. So, if Lizzie Borden didn't kill her parents, who did? And also, why? If it was Lizzie, why did she do it? Let's get into these theories, shall we? All right. First theories: Lizzie was in a fugue state. She was physically abused by her father. Mystery author Ed McBain, in his 1984 novel Lizzie, suggested that Borden committed the murders after being caught in a lesbian tryst with Sullivan. So the third theory is that she had been caught um, in a lesbian affair with the maid. All right then. McBain elaborated on his speculation in the 1999 interview, speculating that Abby had caught Lizzie and Sullivan together and had reacted with horror and disgust, and that Lizzie had killed Abby with a candlestick. But we know it was an axe. When Andrew returned, she had confessed to him, but killed him in a rage with a hatchet when he reacted as Abby had. McBain further speculates that Sullivan disposed of the hatchet somewhat afterwards. In her later years, Borden was rumored to be a lesbian, but there was no speculation about Sullivan, who found other employment after the murder and later married a man she met while working as a maid in Butte, Montana. She died in Butte, Montana in 1948, where she allegedly gave a deathbed confession to her sister, stating that she had changed her testimony on the stand in order to protect Borden. So I'm going to believe this. I think that the maid was, if Lizzie killed her parents, I think the maid kind of knew that. The maid was in on it. If she was, if Lizzie didn't do it, I still think that maybe Lizzie knew something and the maid knew something, and they were kind of on it together. Another significant suspect is John Morse, Lizzie's maternal uncle, who rarely met with the family after his sister died, but had slept in the house the night before the murders. According to law enforcement, Morse had provided an abruptly perfect and over-detailed alibi for the death of Abby Borden. He was considered a suspect by police for a period. So, I mean, it does seem kind of convenient that he slept in the house the day before, and then the next day, they're dead. So he could have easily come back. But from what I remember, I think there was it was this was obviously, I don't know, I'm not gonna, this was a theory that there was another person, like a neighbor or like a, somebody that was like a criminal on the street, just happened to pick a random house and kill them. But that seems a bit far fetched. So I think, to wrap this video up, you can believe all the theories you want about why Lizzie killed her parents, or you can think that maybe she didn't kill them at all. Maybe it was John Morse. I think it was one of the two. Maybe they were all in on it. Maybe Lizzie, her uncle, and the maid were all in on it. And heck, maybe Lizzie killed her stepmother, John Morse killed her father, and the maid was just tied into all of it. Has anybody ever brought that up? That seems more plausible than anything. I think I just solved the freaking case. You're welcome. Boom. But yeah, what do you think happened with Lizzie Borden? Do you think she took the old axe to her stepmother and father? Would you sit on the couch that Andrew Borden was murdered on? Would you stay in the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast? You can, of course, answer any of these questions by reaching out to me. But for the most part, this case remains unsolved. And I do hope you enjoyed this extra long episode of Mystery Unsolved. And next week will be another grisly topic that I'm saving and keeping for myself. This has been Justin the Invenue, Mystery Unsolved. Until next week.